Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our scenario-based demo series. My name is Brendan Lee, and today in session 4, we're going to discuss AIP Scanner. So let's go ahead and get started. So to begin, we'll provide a very quick recap of the previous episode, as well as a refresher of our scenario-based demo environment. Then we'll jump right into discussing AIP Scanner, starting with the architectural overview, then moving on to the recommended configuration, and finally ending with a technical demo of the AIP Scanner in our SBD environment. Now, in our previous episode, Waleed walked us through a very interesting security versus compliance overview before discussing compliance management challenges and recommendations. We then discussed Microsoft 365 Compliance Manager and how it can help address some of those common compliance challenges. Our colleague Shashank then finished up with a technical demo of the Compliance Manager component. So next, let's recap at a high level the fictitious company environment that we introduced in episode 1 of this series. We have just recently migrated to the cloud using Microsoft 365 and Azure. All users' identities are hybrid identities. All of our user mailboxes have been migrated to Exchange Online, as well as the personal user drives to OneDrive for Business. And we're heavily using Microsoft Teams for collaboration. We maintain a hybrid IT environment where some components are still hosted on premises, such as domain controllers, Exchange servers, SharePoint servers, and network file shares. So with that, we have many files still residing on the SharePoint server farms and the local network file shares that we need to inspect and evaluate to identify if they need to be protected. All right, let's discuss the AIP Scanner architecture. AIP Scanner is a Windows service installed on a local machine which crawls file repositories. It's recommended to deploy a dedicated machine for it because the service is CPU intensive and memory consuming, so it's better to offload this work from the file repository itself. An SQL database is used to store the configuration acquired from the Azure service and to maintain an operational database to keep the list of scanned files and allow incremental scans. The database, however, does not store file content. Now, AIP Scanner should have a connection to the cloud in order to leverage the Azure portal to manage the scanner, get the discovery reports, and apply protection. The scanning targets are then accessed using the Common Internet File System, or CIFS protocol, for file servers and NAS, and HTTPS for SharePoint. Now, let's discuss the AIP Scanner recommended configuration. We recommend that the AIP Scanner machine, as well as the SQL server, are allocated 8 CPU cores and 16 gigs of RAM. The number of nodes depends on the environment and the amount of data. For large environments, up to 10 to 12 nodes are recommended, as well as having a dedicated service account with non-interactive activations of AIP. Finally, a high-speed and reliable network is required between the scanner and the repository, whereas a local area network is preferred. Now, to dig into this configuration deeper and provide a technical demo of the AIP scanner, I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Waleed. You can take it from here, Waleed.
Thanks, Brendan. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our SBD series. Hopefully, you're enjoying it so far. My name is Walid Al-Morsi, and today I will take you through an Azure Information Protection AIP Scanner demo. As discussed before, we have lots of information sitting in our SharePoint on-premises environment, as well as the network share. The aim here is try to scan all of these files and information and try to find out what this data is. So let's get started. Before we start the actual AIP scanner demo implementation, it's a good idea to go over the current environment to make sure we know what components do we have and what we are trying to achieve. First of all, as we discussed, we have an on-premises Windows Active Directory, and we are synchronizing the user object as well as device object to the cloud. We also have an on-premises file share that is hosted on Windows File Share Server. This company network share folder structure is again mapped to our 4 departments, which is Finance, HR, Marketing, Research. Each of those has its own folder structure, and we don't know what's on them. This is why we are implementing an AIP scanner to try to find out or discover what sort of information that we have. Similarly, we have an on-premises SharePoint infrastructure. We have mainly 4 sites, again, mapped to each department that hosts this department folder structure and documents. We also have an SQL server. As you can see here, we have implemented SharePoint. This SQL server will be hosting the AIP Scanner SQL database. Okay, now we know what we have. Let's start our implementation. First thing we have to do is downloading the AIP Scanner Unified Labeling Client. Just make sure you download and install the latest version available on the Microsoft website. So we will head to our search engine and try to look for it. All right, so we have landed in here. Click on download. So you are looking at the Azure Information Protection _ul.exe. Highlight that. Next. Now it is downloaded. Let's go to the download page and try to just put it somewhere that we know the path to. Let's call the folder AIP and then paste it here. Let's install that client. Right click, preferably always run as an administrator. Then go through the wizard. Then click I agree. It's pretty quick. Now, as you can see, the installation has completed. Click close. Now we have installed the AIP Scanner Unified Labeling Client. The next step is to configure the scanner on the Azure Information Protection portal. To do this, let's head to the Azure portal. Obviously, we have to log in. Now we're logged in. We have to head to our Azure Information Protection portal. So first thing, we have to go to cluster, and we have to start by creating a new cluster. Click add, give a name to the cluster. So I will call it SBD AIP cluster -01 AIP Scanner cluster. Just give it a meaningful name. Hit save. Now you've got the cluster, you got your description, you have nothing there under the network scan job, and you don't have any nodes. Nodes basically is the member server of this cluster. Next, we will move on to create content scan job. So content scan job is basically you define all the parameters and the search criteria, as well as the location where you want to look for data. So we start by clicking add. Let's call it SBD file share job. And then any meaningful description. This is to scan on-prem file shares. Again, this is only for discovering information or information type that we have. We are not going to enforce or label or block using DLP for now on this content job. So let's go ahead and keep it always running. Info types that we need to discover. If we have defined sets or sensitive information type or custom information type, we can say policy only, but at this case, we just started, we don't know what we have on-prem, so we'll keep the types for everything that we have, all the sets that we have. Treat recommended labeling as automatic, leave it as is. Now, to configure the locations that we need to look at, you will notice that there is a lock in here and we cannot even click on it. The reason behind this is the content scan job has to be saved first, and then we can go back and configure those locations. So let's keep moving on. Enable DLP rules. As we said, it's only for discovering at this stage, and we don't have any DLP rules or policies configured. So we will go back and do that once we have the DLP configuration completed. Sensitivity labeling policy, enforce. We don't want to enforce anything at this stage. Now, label files based on content. We have to keep that on. Otherwise, it will not discover anything. Default label, keep the policy default. And obviously, we don't have any default label at this stage, so we keep the policy default. And relabel files, we keep that off. As we said, it's a discovery phase. Configure file settings, preserve data modified, last modified, modified by attributes. This is important to keep. And here you have the option to exclude specific file types or extensions from the scanning. So I will leave the default for now. Here, the default owner is the scanner account. Set owner, I will keep it off for now. And then go up and hit save. Now, as our content scan job has been saved, we can go and configure our repositories. If you click on that, if you click add, it will ask you for the path or the UNC path for the network share. So if you go back here, we will have company network share, and then within that path, we have 4 different paths. Let's take the root path and try to scan everything within it. And then we will keep all the settings here as default. So basically, we can control on and off for each of these settings, but we will keep the content scan job defaults for now. Save. Now, as we have added the company network share repository, let's go and add a couple of SharePoint on-prem URLs as well, which are the HR all documents and the finance all documents, to instruct the AIP scanner to go and inspect the files within as well. So the first thing we have to do is adding the URL. I have it copied already. So the SharePoint under sites, finance, shared documents, and I will keep all the settings as is. Then click save, and then I will go add the same URL construct. However, this time I will add HR, and then hit save. Now we have added the 3 repositories that we have. Let's move on to the next section. You will see here the content scan job. We have the name. We haven't yet assigned it to a cluster, and then it didn't run so far. So let's assign it to a cluster. It will ask you to choose a cluster. We only have one cluster we just created, and then save. Now, if you go back and click on the nodes section, you will notice that we don't have any nodes listed. Also, we don't have any option to add or create a new node. The reason behind this, the AIP Scanner Unified Labeling Client has not yet been configured as a scanner on the actual machine. So let's go do that. So first thing we have to do is using an account that has local access right on the AIP machine, start the PowerShell as an administrator. Also, we need to make sure that this account has write access on the SQL master database. So if you go to the SQL security, you will find that I've already added our SBD_AIP service account and given it the required permission. sysadmin would be enough for now. Now back to your Windows PowerShell, which is running under an administrator account. Let's install the scanner. So to do this, you have to run the install AIP Scanner command line, and then you specify the SQL Server parameters. So SQL Server instance, we have it setting on the SQL Server that we have. And then you have to specify the cluster. So basically you specify the cluster that this node will join. What did we call it here? We call it SBD-AIP cluster-01. And then hit enter. It will ask you for your credentials. And again, these credentials is typically the AIP Scanner service account. As you can see, if you've done everything right, when I say everything right, the SBD AIP account has a login as a service, permission has the right access to the database, so that should continue without issues. As you can see here, it's been completed. So once you do that, go back to the services console. You should be able to find the AIP Scanner service. So it's been running, and then it is running under the service account for AIP. Now, the next task on your list is you need to get an Azure ED token for the scanner service account to authenticate so that the scanner can run unattended. So just before we do this, do yourself a favor, go back to your folder and try to create a text document. Keep that open and then type three things. First thing is application or client ID, secret value, and secret ID. And we will know why we're doing this a bit later. All right. Now, go back to the Azure Information Protection, and you can see here there is no node has been added because the server that hosts the scanner does not have the proper authentication or token to work with the Azure Information Portal. So we need to log into the Azure Active Directory, and then under Manage, there is App Registrations on the left-hand side. Click on New Registration. The user-facing display name, we will call it AIP Scanner. And again, we will keep it for accounts within the single tenant. And then under the redirect URI, keep it as web. And for the link or the URL, put HTTPS localhost. Then click register. Once it's registered, copy the application client ID, then go back to your file and then paste the value. Now, still within the AIP Scanner application, go to Certificate and Secret. You will find the under Client Secret, click on New Client Secret. In the description, let's put something meaningful, SBD AIP Client Secret. So under Expires, select what is appropriate for you. For now, I will create it for 1 year and then click Add. once you click add, you have to copy those two values because you will never see them again. So that's why I hinted that you have to have a file to copy to. So let's copy the secret ID. Paste it here. Then copy the secret value. And then put it here. Just make sure you save. Right. Next, once we saved, we click on API permissions. Now, under configure permission, let's have add a permission. Make sure the Microsoft APIs is highlighted or selected, and then go for Azure Rights Management Services. Here you go. Click on that. Then you will have two options. Click on Application Permissions, and then select Content Delegate Reader and Content Delegate Writer. Then add permissions. Once it's done, you will notice that it's not granted yet. We have one more step to go. Go again to add permission. This time, select APIs my organization uses, and then look for Microsoft Information Protection Sync service. This one, click on it. Now again, application permissions, and then unified policy.tenant read. Select that, add. Now we have added the required permission. Let's grant the admin consent for our tenant. Click on grant and then click yes. Now go back to your Windows PowerShell. Now what we need to do is set the AIP Scanner authentication. So to do this, let's store our credentials in a variable. Now we've stored the on-prem AIP Scanner service account credentials in a variable. Now we need to set the AIP authentication. To do this, we have to start by typing set AIP authentication, and then we have to specify the app ID, and this is where your text file will become very handy because you can just copy the application ID back here, and then app secret as well, which is the secret value in here. Now we have to specify the delegated user. So basically the delegated user is the Azure Active Directory based user account that will be able to act on behalf of the on-prem AIP service account. In that case, I will just put my admin account in, but obviously you should have a scanner account sitting in the Azure EDA to act on behalf of the on-prem AIP service account. Now, the next parameter is the tenant ID, which I have obtained from the portal. And then I will specify on behalf of parameter with our stored credentials, and then hit enter. As you can see, acquired access token on behalf of my on-prem AIP service account. Now, after completing the token delegation, wait for a few minutes and then log back to your Azure Information Protection portal and try to check if the server has been added to the nodes section. So as you can see, now the AIP Scanner server is listed under the nodes section, under the right cluster. It is running, and the last seen time and the correct version of the AIP Unified Labeling Client. Moving on to the next section, let's configure the analytics. So basically, the AIP scanner logs can be obtained either from the AIP server local log files, or, which is the easiest way, you can dump everything in the log analytics workspace, and then you can start looking at them and analyze them as you go. So let's look how we can set that up. So let's create a new workspace. So basically, you go to the Azure Information Protection, go to Configure Analytics, create a new workspace. As you can see, I have a free trial for log analytics, and I have my resource group already created. Now let's create a workspace by giving a name. So I will call it SBD AIP Scanner. And let's give it a location, West US, for example. Create. Obviously that incur cost, but as you saw, I have my own trial subscription. Just proceed with care and then create. Now, as you can see, the log analytics workspace is being created, deployment in progress, and we can just see or monitor how it's going from that side. And the deployment is now complete. Now let's jump on to the data discovery pane. This is basically the data being discovered and stored, now the logs stored in the log analytics. So let's click on that one and see what will happen. As you can see, now we can see few things, which is good. You have a lot of filtering you can configure. So let's say the activity date from 7 days ago, obviously we just installed it now, so we don't need to go back to 31 days. The location type, we selected any, but you can select whatever applicable to you, or you want to, further scope your search. If you have any label, but obviously we don't have any label discovered, we don't have any label configured yet. Now, in terms of information types, so basically, as you can guess, this is the information type list that we discovered based on our search. You can see here our information on-prem contains Australian business number, credit card numbers, EU debit card numbers, etc., etc. And also it discovers some health-related information. So if we select those as well, and we hit filter, you can see here a very nice visual representation of the number of documents that contain specific information type. And as you can see here, all the information types, the number of documents, what's sensitive information type that was discovered in such documents. So for example, we have 8 documents that contain credit card numbers. We had 5 documents that includes European national identification numbers, etc., etc., and the list goes on. That will give you a very good idea on what information exists in your on-prem environments. You can find here its per location or per repository. So you can find here under the network file share, we had files with information type 16 of them. And under sites on the SharePoint, we had 10. So let's click on the first one here. If we go and look further for the network share, that you can see here, all the file paths located or searched by the scanner. So you can see here we have like a CSV file that contains US passport numbers, etc., etc. You can find a file type, whether it's a document, an Excel sheet, a PDF, etc., HTML even, it's everything included in here. And the last modified date for each file included in that list as well. So you maintain the last modified date. And obviously you can find a lot of names here who last edited this file and what information type matched the information within that file. Does it have protection or not? Obviously, we didn't have any protection applied at this time. There is no label, as you can see. Now, that will change once we go through our MIB sensitivity labels demos and we start enforcing labels. As we said, this is just a discovery phase. So you've got all the information you might need. So if you try to go back, and let's have a look on the SharePoint as well, similar information. So you will find the path or the URL link directly to the file, and you have all the similar information included in there. And obviously, last modified by the administrator, because this is where I uploaded the documents for the demo. Now, before we close out this episode, let's quickly go over the SBD requirements one more time to see if we have any updates and whether we managed to address any of the previously listed requirements. The only applicable requirement in this case that we managed to partially address in this session is the on-premises data in files shares and SharePoint farms should be inventoried and protected appropriately from unauthorized disclosure. As now we have managed to go through our on-premises repositories and have a detailed view of what types of sensitive data we have. However, we have not yet applied any protection on them, whether that would be labeling or encryption. But this will change after a few episodes when we are done configuring our sensitivity labels and DLP policies, where we will come back here to the AIP scanner and enforce those protection policies. And we're done. So thank you for hanging around. This is basically how you install/configure AIP Scanner. So as you can see now, we can have a better idea on the sensitive information types. What do we have on our on-premises locations, such as network shares, SharePoint environment on-prem, or any Windows indexable files that we have. That was the second tool, if you remember from the SBD session 2, we had two tools. So Content Explorer in the Security and Compliance portal, which will be shown to you at some stage. And then number 2 is the AIP scanner for on-prem files. This is how we used the insights from both tools to come up with our content classification scheme that we discussed in session 2 as well. In the next session, we will start looking at the Microsoft Information Protection components. We will have our Euro Mecha configuring sensitivity labels for content, showing you how things get done and how to deploy the whole thing from A to Z. Till next time, see ya.
Welcome back. Thank you for watching so far, and I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to watch our next videos in this great scenario-based demo video series that we prepared just for you. Also, make sure to check out our one-stop shop resource page that we prepared just for you that contains all our resources from the MIP CXC team. That's at aka.ms/MIPC/OSS. Thank you, and see you on our next videos.